share any thoughts with us? Seeing no one, we will have another comment period, public comment period at the end of the meeting, so let's strike your fancy and we'll have time. The consent agenda, has everyone had a chance to review the consent agenda?
Yes.
Is there a motion to approve?
So move.
Any comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Board Chair's report. I would just like to thank Kathy. Who? We like what you've done with the place.
Which she personally is.
Thank you to you and your staff for hosting us this evening. It was really quite nice, just wonderful building, just so nice to see it all put together and have the chance to walk through, meet some of your staff members and just see the amazing work that's been done. And to members of the building committee who worked so hard to see the project through and to bring it home. It looks a lot different from when I was here with my kids, and we had buckets in the hallways every time it rained. And I think at one point we even joked about decorating the buckets, so because they were just part of the furniture. And then there was a time that our PTA commandeered a janitor's office as our little space, but we got kicked out because they needed it for educational purposes. So that's how tight space was in the building. So congratulations, and I'm sure you and your students and your families will just feel right at home here and it'll be very conducive to learning. Members of the community who weren't able to come through the walkthrough tonight, fear not, there is another walkthrough scheduled for Saturday morning, November 18th from 9 to 12. And you'll be hearing more about that. We'll be publicizing. And many thanks to Building Committee member Patty Temple, who did an incredible job this week rallying and getting the word out. So thank you very much. And with that, let's go to the superintendent's report.
Terrific. I have a couple of items. The first, since we are at Miller Driscoll and we have a Miller Driscoll TV club, our students prepared a short video clip that I'd like to share with you. And then
I like all the new parts and all the new upgrades of all the entire building and the cafeteria and everything else about the building. This is Melanie from Mr. Ellis's 7th grade class. We asked people at Miller Driscoll School what they liked about the new school building. I like the big green kite. I like the new offices. I like the new office because it's big and it has one door that you can go through. My favorite part about the new school is we have more places to display our artwork. I like the new art and music rooms. The area is bright and colorful. I like the colors in the school. I like the new cafeteria because the handprints on the ceiling are so bright. I like the Lego table at library. I like the new ceiling above the library.
I like the new building because it's bright, airy, happy, and colorful.
Hi, what I like about the new building is that it's very modern. I also like the new parking, and everything's just great.
I love how bright and colorful our new school is. It really makes it a happy place for me to work and a wonderful place for the kids to learn.
Thank you for our new school!
Great. So I asked Chris Burney to come and join us this evening and give us an update. So I'd like to invite Chris to come forward.
It's lonely up here.
Chris, does everybody know who you are? I was a man with many hats.
Yes. I'm not sure. Do you want me to address what I talked about the other night or answer questions?
Yeah, why don't you just top line some of the concerns and where we are in the process. I think that would be most helpful.
Just to recap a little, we finished the project ostensibly a couple of weeks before Labor Day, the end of the summer. And once we had the complete installation, we went back into a process called commissioning, which is a normal process in construction. It typically takes a year because there are 4 seasons involved. And the job of the commissioning agent is to basically verify that everything works the way it was intended to, and the outcomes are what we desired when the specifications were written. It quickly became apparent that in some of the areas.
Sorry, Chris, there's a mic so that people on the behind.
Okay. It quickly became apparent that in some of the areas we were not able to achieve the design conditions for cooling, both as it relates to temperature and relative humidity. We would have liked to have more time to do the commissioning during the summer months, because when we're working in the summer, it gives us this living laboratory to test the system against. We're into cooler weather now, so we don't have the same ability to run the system in the cooling mode and see what's happening. There is a building monitoring system that measures conditions, multiple conditions, multiple times during the day in every single space. And we draw from that reams of paper, which is converted to Excel spreadsheets, and we can analyze trends. So it would have been nice to have more time. The bottom line is that as we speak, and we had another meeting tonight, there is not a consensus opinion as to why we are unable to meet the design conditions. There's a belief that it is an integration system, that as we continue to balance the systems, commission the systems, and write the software, modify the software so the systems work together, we will achieve the desired results. But there is always the chance that we may not. And the reason that we're talking about this now is, and I was asked this question on Tuesday by one of the selectmen, what's the worst case? And the worst case is that we can't make it work. And that's not opinion that I like to give you, but from an engineering point of view, we can either do it or not. So if the worst case is it doesn't work, what is the solution? Well, the solution may be that we'd have to replace some equipment. That takes a long time. That's 12, 14 weeks just to get the equipment manufactured. And if we looked at when we would want to have this problem reconciled, it would be before next summer, before the warm weather arrives. Typically in May and June, we'll see some spiked temperatures and humidity conditions, and we want to have it fixed by then. So the only opportunity to do any wholesale work would be during this April break. If we back the time off from that, and you're looking at 3 to 4 months for delivery, because this equipment is not shelf item, it's not stock item. It's manufactured specifically to meet the requirements of the design engineers. So if you back those times off, you're all of a sudden into January, December to make a decision, and it's November. You know, Thanksgiving is over 6 weeks tomorrow. We don't have a lot of time. So we're talking about it now because we need to know, we believe that this can be fixed, but we also need to be realistic and say that if it's not, we need all of this time to make those changes and repairs. I don't have an opinion. Well, I do have an opinion. I believe we can fix it. But I don't have a weighted opinion that says I think it's more likely this or the other. If I didn't believe we could fix it, the team wouldn't be here. The team has been together at the table. The manufacturer who designed his equipment to meet the specifications of the design engineer. The architect who works with the design engineer. The contractor who takes those pieces and puts them together. Turner, our construction manager, who is our agent in this process. The town, myself, we have all been there. The town's HVAC expert, Mark Esposito, has been an immense help. None of us has an answer, and that's what bothers me. And that's why we're trying to talk now about what the potential outcomes are. So having said that, that's pretty much a synopsis of where we are. I don't have any other statements. That's pretty much it. Any questions?
How much of the building is affected?
I'm sorry?
How much of the building is affected?
The new construction is not affected. That is on a different type of system. So that's the addition. The administrative wing is a different system. So essentially what is affected, unfortunately, is the old building that's been renovated, which is that's most of the classrooms. And this area has a new system, and the library. There are new systems in the new construction, in the gym, multi-purpose room, in the administration. Everything, those are all traditional systems. What's impacted, the areas impacted are served by what's called a variable refrigerant flow system, which is a little more difficult to work with than a traditional system. But it's mostly the older classrooms that were renovated.
Of the $40 million that we invested in this total project, what percentage of the total project do you think this represents? And part of what I'm trying to get at is, my understanding is that while it's uncomfortable and needs to be dealt with, it's a hugely successful project, and this is a kind of a small hiccup towards the end. Is that an accurate assessment?
Yes, I think that's accurate, percentage-wise. I won't pretend that if we had to go to that worst case that Dick DeBar asked me about, we may be looking at $200,000 to $300,000. But on $42 million, mathematically, that's not a large percent.
And is it safe to say that that $200,000 to $300,000, if it were to come to be, would be borne by somebody other than the town?
I don't know that I have the ability to answer that. I would answer it by saying that the contractors, well, the design company carries what's known as errors and omission insurance. And if it was determined at some point that they had made errors, then the claim would be made against their insurance company. If there is additional equipment required, which should have been required in the first place, then the town will have to pay for that. Because if it had been on the drawings the first time, we would have paid for it then. So it's not a straightforward answer. I'm not trying to give you funny answers, but it depends a lot on where the fault lies. Is there a potential that the town has to pay a piece of the bill? Yes. But there's another potential that we might not have to pay anything.
In your professional experience and opinion, an issue of this size relative to a project of this size, is it typical to see issues like this come up during the commissioning process?
It's not unusual to have problems come up. It is, in my experience, not usual to have a problem of this magnitude. And magnitude, I mean the geographical nature, when you consider how many classrooms are affected. Not magnitude in terms of financial resources.
Thank you.
So what is the team's next steps, your approach going forward?
We are continuing to meet en masse. That is, we have engineers from the manufacturer. We have the principals of the design engineers. We have the principals of the architect. We have people from our commissioning company. The commissioning company works directly for the town. That's one of the checks and balances that's in place. The controls manufacturer, we're all at the table regularly, and if not at the table, we're on conference calls. We will continue that process next week and the following week, and I think within 2 weeks from now, we are going to have an idea of whether we will be able to continue to work together as a group or whether we'll go to the next step. Obviously, we're all engineers together right now. If we go to the next step and we start to bring counsel in, that all falls apart. Because what will happen is the company's own counsel and all of the individual companies' counsel and insurance companies will say, now everything goes through us. And that's what I'm trying really hard to stay away from.
Right. Have you ruled out certain things?
We've ruled out a lot of things from a technical point of view. Unfortunately, we haven't ruled out the right one.
Right. Trying to get the right diagnosis.
There are 12 to 15 people around this table who are all senior engineers, and we're all as puzzled as the next one. And maybe it's not a good thing to say, but that's the honest assessment.
Okay. And it's only on very hot days? Like
Yes.
Today was a nice day. Was today effective?
No, today we had no problem. It would require temperatures above 85 and high relative humidity outside. And those days, we had a warm September. We saw quite a few of those. If you ask me on an annual basis how many days this might impact the school, I'd say maybe 20. That's 20 too many for me. But it's not, I don't want you to think that the system doesn't work. The system, we're monitoring carbon dioxide, we're bringing fresh air in, we're filtering the air, we have good quality air. We have, all of the things that we've learned over the years are being implemented in every single space in this building. The one piece we can't get is the temperature, and which impacts the relative humidity.
Any other questions?
It just is, I assume there is no real health impact to the teachers or the kids,
No.
Yeah.
right? So it may be uncomfortable, but there are no health implications, we're sure of that, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Anything else? Thank you very much for
Okay.
coming tonight.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Chris. Thank you.
We're done?
All set.
Okay. Committee reports. How about the building ops? Chris and Glenn?
Well, you just, from a building perspective, you just heard Chris's comments, and the only thing I would add to that is that we'll get it fixed, we'll get it solved. I think the key thing is that this is a very complex system. From an engineering perspective, if you're familiar with the building at all, there's not a lot of room to work above the ceilings in these classrooms, which led to a very complex, intricate design of the system to give all the classrooms their own individual controls and individual flow and individual monitoring. So, but I think, as Chris says, it requires an 85-degree plus and high relative humidity to impact, which those days are few and far between, but it's an issue when those days come, and I feel confident that we'll get that done. The only other thing from a building perspective, as you know, I commented at our last meeting about the library learning commons. Tried to get on the Board of Selectmen's agenda for this past Tuesday night's meeting, wasn't able to do so. We'll continue to pursue that to get that change done. Those of you who were kind enough to come and visit with us this evening and take the tour saw that the library is the only area in this building that has not been upgraded and impacted and brought up to date the way the rest of the school has been. So we will continue to pursue that and try and make that happen before things go away. On the outside, I met this morning with Richard Creeth from the Board of Finance and with Ann and Leslie from our auditors, and just discuss the audit process, what we're going through, to try and get, I think, a better understanding of the scope and what they're doing, why they're doing what they're doing. We had a very productive meeting, I thought this morning. We're going to continue to work along those lines to try. And we did have some discussion about the need for and the benefit to have, if necessary, an independent audit committee as part of from the Board of Finance and the Board of Ed being participants in the committee. We're not there yet. I don't know. You know, we will continue to have those discussions, but it was a good meeting this morning.
Yeah.
I think it was really productive. So, okay.
Thank you. Teaching and learning?
Teaching and learning, we met last week and reviewed, I think, about 8 proposed 6141 proposals for new courses. Very excited about that, and so you'll be seeing them over the next couple board meetings. The Digital Advisory Committee will have its next meeting on the 19th. And I just wanted to give a shout out to our Community Steps program, which is our postgraduate program. I happened to be at the Village Market today, and a group of the students were there at a bake sale raising money for Save the Children for hurricane relief. So it was a pleasure to meet some of the kids who are in that program and having them talk about what they were doing there and whatever. So kudos to them for their efforts. So, do you have anything to add?
Bruce, would you like to give a policy? Or slacker committee?
I'll leave it to the chairman.
We're meeting Tuesday, and we actually have quite a few policies in the pipeline.
Okay.
We're on to the next phase of the CAVE audit. So we spent this past year introducing policies that weren't necessarily in our manual, and so now we're going back through the next body that we have but need to be updated because of legal changes and things like that.
Right. One thing we'll be bringing to you is an updated field trip policy, and just when we sort of thought we had it in good shape to bring to you, we were reminded that the state just passed a mandate that we have to require notification of insect incidents in each place. If we leave the country, we have to notify parents about potential insect populations of the destination we're heading to. So, just when you think you're ready, we have to take a step back for that. So we'll get it. We're working on it. We'll do it right. So onward to the review and discuss strategic improvement plan review by our principals.
Okay, so I just wanted to provide a little context for this when we get set up. So I think sometimes we're not really good about explaining our reasoning for doing these presentations or what the through line is across presentations over time. So I just kind of wanted to be a little bit more explicit about that. So as we are approaching budget season, what we're trying to do is to kind of build understanding around where we are as a school system, a school community, where it is that we want to be, and how we're going to close that gap. And so if you remember at the end of last year, we talked to you about what progress we had made on our action plans. And that was really around what we were doing around teaching. This past board meeting, we talked a little bit about where we are in terms of student outcomes, where we were in terms of reaching our targets, and where we were in relation to our reference groups, the DERG, the state, and the nation. So tonight, and I just wanted to mention, the process of setting targets using the scorecard and then writing action plans is a relatively new endeavor for us as a system. And so I think we had some successes. You'll notice that some of our targets were achieved, some were not. Some of our action plans, some of the steps were achieved, some were not. It's my expectation that over time, as we do this more, we're going to get better and better at it. And so tonight what we're going to do is we're going to have our principals talk a little bit about where we want to be and what we're going to do to close that gap. So they're going to go through their targets and their action plans. We are also going to hear a presentation. So that's kind of what instruction is about. Kind of put that in the instruction bucket. We're also going to have our curriculum coordinators come up and talk to you about what they've done over the summer and what their plans are moving forward in terms of curriculum and assessment. And what you're going to see across both of those presentations is kind of the thread of professional learning, because that impacts both. I would also say we talk about curriculum, assessment, instruction, professional learning as though they're separate things for discussion purposes, but in fact, they're all part of the same thing. They do go together. My hope is that with these presentations, as well as some future presentations, we again will build the understanding that we need in order to make some good decisions around the budget. The next presentation, my hope is that we can dive a little bit deeper into things like the climate data. And we're going to ask Bill Preble to come and talk a little bit about our work around basically the social emotional wellness of our students and our staff. We'll also share with you some action plans around, at the district level, around digital learning, as well as the district management group, which is basically remedial intervention and special education. My hope is after that, maybe as a group, we have some time to reflect on all of these things we've heard over time and think about what our priorities will be, because then we'll be in a good position to engage with the community around their priorities and then make some good decisions around the budget. Does that make sense? Okay. With that, I'm going to ask my principal friends to come up and share their plans. Unfortunately, Dr. Mitchell couldn't be with us, so we have Catherine O'Keefe and Lauren Cambrano here in her place.
Miss Kuhn is the belle of the ball tonight.
We're going to take a vote, right? I can just get. All right. I really think I have a pretty loud voice, but okay. So looking at our targets, I just want to explain to you that we did a little switching of our targets from last year to have them be more in line with my colleagues at my other schools. So the math test that the kids take at Miller Driscoll is for kindergarten through second grade. And the best predictor is kids who score above the 60th percentile will then go on to do really well on a smarter balanced assessment as they move through the schools. So we had a different target last year where we were looking at kids above the 95th percentile, but that didn't align with anything else that was happening in the district. So we really changed what those targets would be. And we looked at now going from the 60th percentile and making sure all of our kids are above the 60th. So our goal is to have 80% or above of all of our students above the 60th percentile in reading and in math. When we go down to the climate data, it's interesting because when we dug into that data, our teachers and our students were actually really well aligned. And on most questions, there wasn't a big gap between those two. So we really would like to, we want to eke those up a little bit, but we think those are pretty strong scores for teachers and teachers and students. And where we're really looking at were parents. And when we dug into the data, it showed that a lot of parents were saying things like, I don't know. So there weren't necessarily negative responses, but there were just things that they didn't know. So I think, like I said to you a couple of weeks ago, we're really looking at changing the communication, and now that so much of it won't have to be focused on construction, thank you very much, we'll be able to communicate on some other things that are happening in the school around vision and what's going on with the students, so that when we do this survey again, parents won't feel like they don't know. All right, so how in the world are we going to do all of that? Question?
Could you just explain the rationale for the targets?
I looked across the years that we've been doing it in the trend data, and that's where I got the information. So they've been going up.
The 2018 target, why you picked 80% of the second graders achieving a 60th percentile on the math test, as opposed to 85 or 90 or 100 or some other number.
Right. I'd really like it to be 100%.
And so why is it?
But based on the 73 from before, and then we looked at some other data from the year before. So based on that trend data, that's why I picked 80%.
What's the longer term objective? This may be a current year, 2018. What would be the 2020 target?
Oh, I would say by 2020 we'd be at least at 85%, I would think.
And 2025?
Oh my gosh, maybe 100. I don't know.
But
the idea is to, because you're building capacity.
Is that purely aspirational, or could there be plans put in place to actually achieve close to 100% success? Success being defined as reaching 60th percentile.
So when we set targets, we look at a number of different things. We look at the trend. We also look at, if we have the information, some benchmark data from other districts. Now, unfortunately, at the lower levels, we don't have that benchmark data. We also have to look at what we believe our resources and efforts can reasonably achieve over time. So I think what Kathy is saying is, given the trend that she's seen in her score so far, the resources and time that she can devote towards increasing those scores, that's a reasonable target. Now, in terms of future years beyond that, it really kind of depends on how we do in reaching that target, because that changes the trend a little bit. I do think, Chris, that if we were willing to pour enormous amounts of resources and time and people, we could accelerate the achievement of even higher targets.
I mean, the community may want to understand what that costs, because we're making a judgment and we're deciding to be constrained in our spending, and it is costing 20% of the kids in some fundamental way. I don't know what happens to those 20%, but if you tell me how do we address those 20% kids?
I actually think when we go into our plan, and I tell you a little bit more about digging into the achievement data and what we actually found that worked, I think it might help.
I just want to make one comment. It's not just cost of money, it's time as well. Like,
yes.
You guys, I assume, in K through 2 don't spend all your days, learning math and reading. There's other skills being taught in the classroom and other things. So that must have some effect on.
And maybe to just put things in perspective, Chuck, can you remind us what's the state, at the state level, how many are above 60th percentile?
Well, not everybody in the state gives the MAP assessment.
All right, so those who do, how do we relate to them?
I'd have to look at that. I haven't gathered that data.
Yeah, I guess my comment would be not dissimilar. If we're targeting at 80 for next year, what was the best performer in the DERG? And
again, not all the DERG administers.
Okay, or of the schools in the DERG who do, we have the data. Does that put us above everybody? Does it put us in the middle of the pack? or
I'd
does
have
it-
to gather that data. We haven't been gathering benchmark data on math.
Yeah, because I think that would be important for us to see, the best school in the Durham that's reporting this is doing, they're at 87%.
Right.
So my question would then be, how do we get from the 80 that you're targeting next year to that 87 or to 90 to be the best?
So
Okay.
basically, when Kathy talks about the 60th percentile, that would be kids who are on grade level. So
right.
we're targeting getting 80% of our students on grade level by next year.
Right.
Generally speaking, if 80% of your kids are at grade level, your tier 1 instruction is considered to be very strong.
Okay.
The other 20% are the students who probably would benefit from a more intensive SRBI. And, when you think about it, some of the kids who are between 73 and 80 are students who are significantly below grade level. It's going to take many, many years to close that gap. So what we're thinking about is who are the students that within a year we can take from below grade level to grade level. And then we have to think about kids who are more significant. And I don't know that we will ever get to 100% of our students at grade level. It is certainly our goal. But, we have students with disabilities, students with intellectual impairments. I'm not so sure we will ever get to 100%. Would you add to that?
But it's still, it's 100% of the 60th percentile.
We want to get to 80% of students at the 60th percentile.
Or above.
Or above.
So mathematically, 100% being above the 60th percentile still means we're only potentially just above the 60th percentile.
Yes, but remember, the 60th percentile is grade level work.
60th percentile represents your at grade level.
Yes.
Do we know, we have breakdowns of the 73, how many are at higher levels?
Oh, yes.
I don't know how difficult it would be, but to Chris's point, I think it's somewhere along the way, we as a board need to understand the what-ifs and the cost to hit the higher number. And you need to come to us and say, we could aim for this, but it's going to cost this either in hard dollar investment and hours of people, time, or whatever it may be.
Sure.
And then it becomes a board decision. Do we as a board and does the community see that this is a critical factor, where we want to go, and where we want to push our system to, and are we willing to make the investment to do that?
Sure, and just to add.
And I don't know how and it's probably quite difficult to do that, but I think it is something we need to be conscious of as we look to set these targets. How aggressive do we want to be and at what cost?
Right. And I think we would also have to engage in a discussion with parents about what is it that we're willing to give up for some of these students to make that kind of progress.
Right.
Okay.
I'm not so sure it would be good for kids, and I'm not sure parents would go for it if their kids were in remedial reading 6 hours a day.
Right.
And no recess and all that.
Right.
Yeah, right.
Okay. But that's what we need to understand.
We'll do our best to get that.
But I do think it would be important to know, where does that 80 put us relative to the schools that do this? Okay.
Okay, so first off, before I go into the plan, I want to talk just a little bit about the process we used to develop this plan this year. So we did meet as a leadership team over the summer for a couple of days, and we looked at our achievement data and our culture and climate data. And after reviewing all of that data and kind of digging into it with using some different protocols, thanks to Dr. Chuck Smith, we created 2 theories of action, and those turned into our essential questions for our plan. So if we foster a school culture built on clear and consistent expectations for a respectful learning community and provide opportunities to develop growth mindsets, will all faculty, students, and families connect as partners in a positive, caring, and productive learning environment? And the second one is, if staff collaborate to study and analyze student work in order to plan small group, targeted and personalized instruction, will there be an increase in growth and achievement for all students? So we stated those as theories of action, not questions, but we turned them into questions for this. And I do want to tell you, and I think this might help with the question that you asked, we did look at the achievement data and looked at what worked last year for the students who made really high growth on the map. So we had some kids who made 100% of their projected growth, and then we had kids who made a lot more than that. And when we dug into the data, those students who made that accelerated growth were a lot of the students who were in intervention and worked with our interventionists. And what happens when you work with an interventionist? You get a small group targeted instruction based on your individual needs. So that's where that theory of action came from. We want to make sure that we have that as a part of our Tier 1 instruction. So just like Chuck talked about, I think if we're better at that small group instruction in Tier 1, then we'll see an increase in those scores. So that's where we looked at that piece. So if we go through the plan, I think you're going to see some themes through the night. Our first theory of action, we called achievement for all, so that goal, and we broke that down into 3 areas. So the first is collaboration, and this is really making the most of our instructional effectiveness teams. So these are groups of teachers who meet, again, and we're going to talk about what they do, but it's finding the time in our schedule for them to be able to meet and go through kind of a data team process. So that first piece is collaboration, and we started this last year actually, and teacher members of our leadership team made a rubric. And so now when they meet in their IETs, they're utilizing that rubric. They're looking at where are they on the rubric for setting an agenda, sticking to the topic, all of those kinds of things, and then they do some reflection at the end. In addition, in that collaboration piece, our instructional coaches started to use something called a swivel, which you hook an iPad up to a swivel, so when they go in to do some demo lessons for teachers, we're creating a bank of those lessons so they can see, teachers can easily see the best instructional strategies, even if they don't have to happen to be in that room right at that time. So that's sort of the first piece, is are we getting people to collaborate? The second piece of it is, okay, now what are we collaborating about? And so that student work and assessment is just all of the different kinds of data that we're looking at. And I want you to see that it's not just the map data. And we purposefully called it student work and assessment, because at our level, we do look at a lot of student work, and there aren't a lot of tests, per se, with our littlest kids. And we're also looking at that last one right before planning, but gathering student data beyond academics. So teachers connecting with their kids, finding out about them personally, so that when you go back to that theory of action, we're doing that small targeted instruction, but we're also personalizing it based on what the kids' interests are. Lastly is the planning, so that's the professional learning piece, and again, that's where teachers are working together to plan that small group instruction. So how do we look at that student data, and then how do we use that to say, okay, now we have the student data, what are we going to do about it, and how are we going to target that for the kids? So that's that piece. We then move down into climate and culture. And again, when we looked at the data in that area, the team talked a lot about consistent expectations throughout the school around behavior, and kind of everyone having a piece of that. So we created a positive behavior support committee, and again, they've created similar to, we're kind of bringing down the 3 R's from Cider Mill. We just stole that, it's a great idea. So we have the 3 R's at Miller Driscoll, and all the kids I think already can tell you what those 3 R's are for hallway, cafeteria, classroom, all of those. In addition here, we talked again about connections, teachers making connections to kids. And then one thing that we're really excited about this year is we're all studying a book called Purposeful Play. So this is weaving play into what we do at Miller Driscoll, and again, it's not for no reason. There is a purpose, and so teachers are learning how to weave that play in, because we think that will also help with that social emotional side with the kids and with their behavior. So if you can play together, you can actually do some work together. And we had an initial conversation as a staff thinking about how did you play when you were a kid? What were some of the skills that taught you? And so we're working a lot around purposeful play. We'll continue also with our student leadership team this year. They've already met. They've already established their name, and they're working on some of their goals. So our adult design team will also continue. But I think that's sort of the highlights of our plan.
question for Ted?
So good evening. I hope that the board notices that there is one of the most connected reporting here, because what Cider Mill has been doing, Miller Driscoll will be doing, and vice versa. So I think the combination is going to make for a very powerful K-5 collaboration. We too have leadership meet during the summertime. We looked at our data, and just like Miller Driscoll reported, we looked at where we thought we could make measurable and attainable growth in a meaningful way. So to a board member's comments about where we would go, to make a substantive jump on paper by numbers would not be reasonable for the teachers and for our expectations of them. So to move in measurable and sustainable jumps, knowing that we need to continue to jump, has been a focus of ours. If you remember back to when Dr. Mitchell made a presentation some weeks ago, we scored in a positive vein for most of our targets. And so what we've done is to take those targets and move them to the next level to continue that growth. When you see the numbers that are up there, one of our biggest disappointments was in the climate score. So going down towards the bottom, that 69, we wanted to go to 75, but we're also going to look at the survey itself to make sure that our students who reported things like not feeling as connected to the staff as the staff would have thought they were, to make sure that the children understand the questions, so that that 75 is a real number based on the children understanding what we were really asking of them. So as Dr. Mitchell mentioned, we did meet a lot of the goals. We've upped the antes. We did things that slightly different than what Miller Driscoll reported. The next slide, please. We looked at the three big areas that we've been looking at in the past, which was math, ELA, and our climate. And we created theories of action through leadership, through the study of how to create theories of action, so that these theories are all grassroots from our team leaders, who are the heads of small academic teams, third grade team leader, fourth grade team leader. We split up the responsibilities to create a theory of action that will speak to the academics, and then we took that a little bit further into the collaboration, and then took that into the communication. So the first theory of action: if the Cider Mill school community fosters connected and trusting student-to-student and student-to-teacher relationships by following the 3 R's, helping reduce stress, ensuring that everyone is listened to, has a sense of belonging, safety, and acceptance, then our Cider Mill school culture and climate will improve, and teaching and learning will be more personalized for students. Second theory of action: if we use the structure of our IET time to analyze student work and formative assessments, and have both teachers and students set learning goals, and have teachers plan focused instruction, then student achievement will increase. And the third theory of action: if we establish building-wide expectations and support for consistent parent communication, i.e. using newsletter, Google Classroom, and emails, then parents will be informed and feel connected to the Cider Mill school community.
Before you go on, Catherine, can I just, back at the targets?
Yes.
Can you speak to why a couple of them, the targets for 18 are actually lower than the 17 results?
There was a presentation made where we looked at the cohort numbers, and so what we looked at was not necessarily going from 5th grade year to year, but how to make that particular cohort increase themselves. We didn't think it was beneficial to just go across year to year.
So how much of an increase would that be for that cohort? Do you have any idea if they were to achieve that goal, that target?
I believe the ELA is an increase of 9 percentage points, math at 16 percentage points, and the total school climate at 6 percentage points.
So, okay, thank you.
So can I just make sure I understand it right? So for the 2018 fifth graders to achieve 39% of target, it would be a 16% improvement over your fourth grade results?
I believe so.
Yeah.
Because if you look at the next slide, our scorecard metrics and targets, we put the percentage points that we have to grow.
Okay, thank you.
So Catherine talked about our theories of action that we are very proud of because it did come from our teachers after looking at our data from 2017. And then the next things that Catherine and I will talk about are the steps that we're going to be taking to reach those goals. So the first section is collaboration and teamwork. The first strategy that you see is that the leadership team is going to engage in professional learning this year to improve our instructional effectiveness teams. So to do that, we're doing 3 different book studies. Right now we're in the midst of becoming a learning team, which I think Miller Driscoll is also going to be using. And that has helped our team a lot as we are starting our goal setting process for our teacher evaluation system. So we're in the midst of that now, and we'll continue with looking at student work together, and then the facilitator's guide to the book of questions as we go through this year. The next big, it's okay. So the next big piece that we focused a lot on last year that we're going to continue this year is our relationships among our staff members. We really have found a lot of success with our staff members of creating a team. We're very excited to see, I don't know if anyone is on our Twitter account, but our first day of school we all had the same t-shirts on, and we just thought that was a great showing of how connected the staff members are, and we're all on the same team. So we're really looking to continue that as we go through. And the next section is our voluntary pilot evaluation plan. So this is a pilot this year that our teachers could sign up for, and it really is actually extra work for the teachers. And over 50% of our staff members have volunteered to do that this year. And it's really focusing on the collaboration among the teachers. So they have to work more with each other and also more with us. So we'll be in their classrooms a little bit more this year, and they volunteered for that.
I think this can't really get enough emphasis. Chuck has designed with his committee a separate pilot evaluation plan for teachers. The teachers that signed up at Cider Mill have to do what all the other teachers have to do. That still stands there. But 50% and 50% of this faculty should be noted that it is the people who did not tend to sign up were people more like a strings teacher or a PE teacher. But the classroom teachers that work as a team anyway, with very few exceptions, they all signed on for this extra evaluation piece. And some key components to that are that they will be evaluated on the ability to collaborate and to create personalized learning for them. So they have to take on extra work, but the number of goals meetings I've already had, people are very excited to have the option to go in and say, what do I need as an instructor to better implement the instruction for my students, going back to how we're going to get those numbers to climb. So the next section that we targeted was assessment, planning, and focused instruction. And as I just alluded to, teachers are in the midst of the goal setting process. And in order to set their goals, they have either been meeting in their SRBI data review groups, where we analyze the details of the SBAC scores along with the fall assessment from the MAP, and target whether these children need a certain kind of instruction within the classroom to meet those goals, if they are ready for intervention. And teachers are being very specific as we want these goals to be measurable, smart goals, and very attainable. And yet the teams, what's been very encouraging is that the teachers like to work together as a team. How are we as a team going to raise the level of all of these children in our house? The coaches have gotten together, and both the ELA coaches and the math coach have put together a cohesive cycle so that we're not going to overwhelm a teacher with too much coaching at one point, but they have looked at all the teachers what they want to do with the teachers and how to do that over the course of the year so that there is more than ample coaching, but not enough that the teacher feels like I have a coach in my classroom 24/7 and I'm not able to breathe or implement what I've been learning. They've also been focusing on something the teachers asked for, which is a response. So I've gone through a coaching cycle, I'm trying it out, I have some questions. Coach so-and-so, could you come back and help me with some particulars I have so I can tweak and finesse the things that we've been working on. So that response time is something that's very, very exciting for Cider Mill. We're going to be implementing components that are within the SBAC materials interim assessments. The potential for these interim assessments, and it delineates up there how often by grade level we're going to be doing, or by subject, what we're going to be doing with them. Again, not to overwhelm, but I think it's a great opportunity for the students to learn the vocabulary that's embedded in the tests, the way the questions are worded, which may be different from other standardized assessments, may be different from how the teacher's own unit assessments are. So the implementation of those SBA interim block assessments is exciting. And then last but not least, I believe there's a little bit of a change in what you see there with what was submitted. We were able to partake in some really exciting PD on Tuesday. Dr. Mary Ahrensworth came to Cider Mill and was joined by second grade, Middlebrook, and Cider Mill teachers. And we were very excited about her comments on adding academic vocabulary, but she also had another twist which is not up there. She called it literary and academic vocabulary, so that students are given specific, through the teachers, not teaching to a test, the teacher embeds this kind of language in their instruction so the children hear it over and over again, and that repeated instruction is considered a help to the children moving forward, both for assessments and also for just how they understand how a book is constructed.
And our last big section is focusing on our school culture and climate. So you can see the first goal is continuing our work with Bill Preble, who's helped us a lot with our school climate. He works with our adult design team and our student leadership team. So we started the year with both of those teams, the adults and the students, looking at our climate data from last year and then using a dot voting process to decide what we wanted our goals to be this year. So the first goal was really about teachers working with students and getting to know them more and bringing in student interest, student interest and choice into the learning to make it more personalized. Our second and third goal are more reactive goals of what adults and students can do to work together if any damage has been done, hurtful words, mean behavior, focus. So those are more reactive between adults and students. The next section is we spent a significant amount of time at the beginning of the year really working on classroom community by using responsive classroom best practices. So teachers were really focusing on what the 3 R's look like. We meant the classroom, in the hallway, in the bathroom, and our school counselors put together a great resource on Google Drive that teachers could use to get to know their students. So they'll continue that work throughout the year, but heavy focus on the first 2 weeks. Our 3 R's, very happy to hear that Miller Driscoll is also doing our 3 R's. Our third graders know them quite well.
You're welcome.
Thank you. And we're just doing different things around the school to really celebrate those, make sure that there's common language that teachers are using, that students are using, and the expectations are known, and focusing a lot on logical consequences this year that are respectful and realistic. And lastly, really the heavy focus on personalizing learning, especially during our WIN block, which is when students are getting what they need. So WIN is an acronym for what I need. So they're either getting an intervention or an enrichment, and we're going to be using the data that we have to really guide that instruction.
And could you go back to that slide, please? So I'd like to point out to the board that number 3, the personalized learning during the WIN block, it is certainly something that should affect the children's feelings about the school and make the children believe that we want the best for them on an individual basis. But that particular line item could also just as easily move up into the assessment area because I think it's been critical to our understanding of the children and how to help meet their needs by these 3 times a year SRBI meetings. So after every MAP assessment, we look at a very detailed data sheet and make sure that the children are being either helped in small groups in the classroom, moving into intervention, or is it time to take them to a child study team because there's something else that needs to be done, perhaps in the lines of special education. So we really look at that with the entire house grade level team, the math interventionists, the reading interventionists, and certainly guidance counselors if it's a behavioral issue. So that line item really fits in a couple of different places.
Thank you.
Okay, a quick question. How many math interventionists and reading interventionists do you have at Sauter Mill?
We have but one math interventionist for the entire school. And yes, and we have reading teachers in each of the houses, but one woman takes care of the entire school for math intervention. Tries. And if I take you to can I borrow the hand? If I take you to one of those meetings, you have people in a sense discussing. Here's a child who has issues in both of those subject areas, and if a child can't read, they cannot do a math word problem, right? So we will err on the side of taking care of the reading issues, but at the same time, we have to help shore up that child's math skills, and there's sometimes a trade-off. You do this for 6 weeks, let's reconvene, see where we are, and then readdress it.
Okay. So as Kathy started us off mentioning, you'll see a lot of vertical alignment through the work that we're doing. I'm going to benefit from the specificity of my colleagues here, and I'm going to be able to be a little bit brief on some of the topics. Certainly, several of the things that were brought up are being done district-wide, including we're very proud of the teachers who are taking on the collaborative work in the teacher evaluation pilot. At Middlebrook, we're also working through the Becoming a Learning team. We're starting at the administrative team level. So you'll see a lot of alignment with what we're doing at Middlebrook as well. So here are the targets that we've set. You'll see that where we're really trying to push ourselves to a larger step forward is moving students who are not yet meeting grade level expectation into that getting at or above goal. We do have quite a nice representation of students who are achieving in an advanced band, and certainly we want to maintain that. Our real focus is to make sure that we are trying to look at our students who are not yet meeting expectations and ask that question, what is it about this learner that's the stumbling block, and what do we have to do instructionally to help them overcome that challenge? So again, building on what was said earlier, that this personalized learning, and that really has to be driven by knowing your students well, both through their assessment data and also through the way that they present in the classroom and the way that they talk about and feel about their learning. So I use the same criteria for target setting as my colleagues in terms of we look at trend data for the cohort of children. We look at our program trend year over year, and looking at where we are relative to the DIRG and where we are committed to going, and trying to look at meaningful progress at an attainable pace. So that's the rationale for the targets that we set. We continue to really be very invested in our math program and trying to help students and parents make wise decisions about getting into the math track or the math pacing that is going to best meet the needs of the learner. That's certainly one of the things we want to do, is make sure that our students are really well prepared for their instruction. And you'll hear a little bit more about that as we go into our action steps. Climate scores. Absolutely a focus across the district as well. Okay. And my action plan's not up there. walk you through it. I do believe it's in your paper packet.
It's not in our paper,
No.
but it was emailed to us. Oh, it is?
It's in the paper packet right after the high school plan.
After the high school.
Okay, sorry about that. So, walking you through our action plan, we, like my colleagues spoke about, we started out with a robust overview of the outcome data that we had, both from academics and from school climate, with our leadership team. We're really trying to leverage our leadership team to help all teachers feel comfortable really working in deep and meaningful ways with student performance data, looking at how are we identifying those children that we want to take a closer look at, to really ask that question, what is it that is a stumbling block for you? So working with that data is an absolutely essential step that we start the year with, and that we will return to periodically throughout the year as a large group, but also that we are really fostering growth in those areas with our small collaborative groups of teachers. So when I look at my goal 1, which is relative to increasing the number of students that are solidly meeting grade level expectation in ELA, we are in our 3rd year of a 3-year rollout of the Reading Ready workshop at the middle school level. So my grade 8 teachers are in implementation for the 1st year. As you know, we're working with a hybrid model. So at 6th grade, really, we have a pretty purist approach from the Teachers College, Lucy Hawkins version. And at 7th and 8th grade, we're really looking at balancing that with what other aspects of a balanced literacy program for middle school students going into the demands of a rigorous high school program. What do we need to have there for them? So we are definitely still providing refinement and strengthening PD for our 6th and 7th grade teachers who are not in year 1 of rollout, but 8th grade teachers are sort of having a big growth curve this year. We absolutely thought that the Mary Ironworth work is absolutely just inspiring and really has fired up to continue that work. One of our great resources in the work for both language arts and social studies is our coaching. So again, the coaching effort, as you know, is at each building district-wide. I think a lot of the really exciting work at Middlebrook in terms of the action plan this year is actually about sheltering time, setting aside time and making sure that we look at the things that are important even if they're not urgent. So one of the things that we were able to do this year is shelter dedicated time within the work week for teachers in each core academic area to collaborate with their job-alike peers. So we talked about that as the EIT, the IET, the Instructional Effectiveness Team. And that's really where we want teachers to be refining their practices. We want to take what's wonderful in our practice already and make sure that we're replicating that strength across settings. We want to make sure that one of the things that we do notice in our data performance is sometimes inconsistent growth. And we want to say what is working in different pockets of our population and how can we leverage that strength across to help all students make strong growth. So sheltering that time was a real win for us. We're continuing to use our professional learning during program days. We're really focusing on looking at student work to drive our instruction. So what is it so really researching based on what our students are presenting to us to tell us what they need next. And we really feel like that has to be a precursor before we can move to really meaningful and strategic small group instruction. So that focus on the small group instruction through the program days is something that is happening both in the STEM side as well as in the humanities side. Our math teachers are excited to be going into year 1 of a curriculum revision program, and we're really going to gain a lot from going through the self-study. That's part of that, really articulating our needs and stepping back and able to take a look at our math program and say, are the decisions that we're living with now the decisions that we think still best suit our learners? And I think that it's a wonderful opportunity for teachers to really reflect on their current practice, especially for our math department where they teach every teacher teaches multiple levels. It's that opportunity to step back and reflect is an important one. One of the innovative things that we did this year, and again, it falls into creating time for what's important, is that we did create a math course. It is, we refer to it as AIM, which is Additional Instruction Math. And we identified children who are up to this point are not performing at grade level, who we want to make sure that they can get the most out of their math instruction on team. We want to make sure that their foundation skills are in place and that their prior knowledge is activated, and so the pump is sort of primed so that they're ready to get the most out of their math program. So we do have students who are taking 3 to 4 additional math classes in each 6-day cycle. And that is in addition to their grade level math. Then the focus of that is to foreshadow what's coming next in your grade level math and identify any misconceptions or skill weaknesses, teaching into those gaps so that when the children are then receiving their instruction on team in their grade level classes, that they are primed for success. This is what we think is going to prove to be a very high leverage strategy to address those students who have it in their zone of proximal development to get to grade level. So it's a different population than we would see addressed by special educators for students who require specialized instruction in math specifically, or it's also a different level of, a different kind of focus than our intervention program. It's really trying to hit that sweet spot of, I'm almost there, but I have some gaps that are preventing me from being successful.
So are those students, if I'm in an AIM class and I'm a 6th grader, am I with just other 6th graders?
Yes.
And am I with 6th graders who are from other color teams?
Yes. Mm-hmm. So the AIM teacher teaches students from all 3 teams, and the idea is that the AIM class paces slightly ahead of the grade level class with a heavier focus on the standards that are most pivotal for that grade level. So what is the really essential work of 6th grade math? Let's make sure that you have the prerequisite understandings from 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade math so that when your teacher is teaching you that pivotal work, you're primed for success and ready. It also, the AIM teacher is a second bite at the apple in terms of extra help. So students can have extra help from their on-team math teacher and also from their AIM teacher. Her schedule is actually somewhat different from a typical classroom teacher so that she has more instructional time outside the school day.
It's just one teacher who's
one
teaching?
teacher. Mm-hmm. And yes, so it's grade level specific because it's pacing relative to the grade level.
And we have 1 section per grade?
2 sections per grade.
Like 20 kids in a class?
We can accommodate a full class size. It isn't small group instruction in any way other than there are needs-based groups just as there would be in any grade level class. We are not at this point fully enrolled. Honestly, we have larger percentage of the families that were offered AIM at the lower grades opted into that. We have a higher percentage of our 8th graders who would have we would have considered eligible for AIM, whose parents decided to opt them out. So that's certainly at their discretion.
Because they didn't want them to miss a stride class or something.
Every minute at Middlebrook is invested in really rich programming, and it's a cost-benefit analysis that parents have to engage in terms of sort of what brings your student joy about middle school. We don't want to take away the thing that meets passion. So we structured the AIM program very purposefully to allow some choice. So students who, their joy is in music can continue in music, but they do have to give up the other side of the other rock. So we have high hopes in terms of seeing outcome there. It's a program that we will be watching really closely, and we're going to maintain a very flexible approach to that. We really want to be responsive to what the student performance data and the student feedback tells us. We want to see dramatic increases, hopefully, in the skill acquisition for those students, in the classroom performance, in the assessment performance. But equally important in my mind is that student disposition of feeling like, I can absolutely do this. We want them to feel like they are can-do kids when it comes to math. So I'm going to move on to our climate. Again, creating time was actually a very big deal for us. We did change something about the structure of our schedule so that we can have 45-minute sessions with our student and adult climate team together without taking the students or teachers out of instruction. So we have a flex block where they come out at sort of team project time, and our team leaders have been very open-minded to working with us on that. Which will give us much more consistent attendance. One of the problems we had was keeping a consistent core team together. We did have a summer kindness crew over the summer. Members of our kids, including rising 6th graders, coming to do extend and continue some of the work of the climate team from the previous year, so that we had a core team with really lovely interconnectedness. It was wonderful seeing our 8th graders really connecting to some of the younger kids coming up in that intergrade level way. And something that has made a really wonderful impact at Middlebrook. Last year, we had about 100 kids and the whole faculty involved in re-articulating what the behavioral expectations were at Middlebrook. Specifically not to make us stricter, but to make us more consistent. We're really trying to help reinforce what the expectations are so that we can praise kids when they're living within them, and we can just gently give them a reminder to get back on course. And it has been really kind of life-changing at Middlebrook. You know, the cell phones aren't out, and the transitions are so much safer and calmer in the hallways. And you know, cafeterias will always be loud and raucous, and really they should be. But in terms of courtesy and listening and really, really wonderful things coming out of that. So we are continuing to collect data not only through Bill Preble's work, but as I mentioned at I think our last meeting, we do also have some in-house measures of student climate and student connectedness. We also are shifting all of the stakeholder feedback goals that my teachers are using for their evaluation this year will be based on student feedback, primarily done through surveys, although also some done through focus groups. And we will absolutely persist in our commitment to building relationships with students. And lastly in that, we did create a kindness club because we are having shorter meetings of our climate team. We want to make sure that all students who want to be involved in climate work can do so, and that those kids doing so have plenty of time. And so we have created a kindness club for all comers as an after-school activity. It's an extension of the summer kindness group. That is the core central group. And that's just some of what's wonderful at Middlebrook right now.
How did you get funding from the Stop and Shop?
So I would love everybody who is out there in Wilton to reach out to all your neighbors and say, please go to Stop and Shop, A+ rewards, and register your card. Now clearly, only if you're already stopping at Stop and Shop. I'm not asking anybody to change their shopping practices, but if you shop with a Stop and Shop card, you can register your Stop and Shop card and to benefit schools. I actually think that you can sign up to benefit both Middlebrook and Cider Mill, which Cider Mill might not know about. We had we are a system of schools. We really wanted to make sure that we could empower kids to make really visible changes in their school environment, and sometimes that does require funding. So we did the Stop and Shop A+ Rewards was a new fundraising effort started last year. We raised a couple $1,000s with less than 200 people signed up. It doesn't impact your gas points either, and it doesn't cost you anything. And even grandmas and grandpas who live in another state, if they shop at Stop and Shop, they can support Middlebrook. So we would love that, and we would really like, things like we're getting we fast-tracked getting some basketball hoops replaced. And it was so necessary, and we knew it was necessary because the kids on our climate team said, we just need this fixed, And so when they have things, when they come to me and say, we don't have enough playground balls, I want to be able to say, okay, so write a proposal about what you think we need and we'll get that done. So that's why I mentioned the Stop and Shop ones. But everybody should go and sign up for real.
Yeah, yes.
Thank you, Laura. Good evening. Our proud work at Milton High School that I'll share with you this evening. You can see now our scorecard metrics in front of you, and I will explain some of the rationale and our strategies here. You can see that our two accountability measures, which are the Connecticut SAT, are right at the very top of our scorecard as appropriate. The 95% from this year, as the board knows already, represented the highest score in the DERG and in the state, so we are proud of that. We are going to audaciously try to move that one tick up to 96%, and I'll discuss our strategies in a moment. I shared with the board during the last meeting that we would continue to hold this 2018 target at 80. That was our target this year. I think we have to continue to push through with that with some research-based strategies, and to answer the good question that I think Mr. Strout posed earlier, that 80 would put us essentially, depending on the performance of the other schools, right in the middle of the DERG, which I think is a starting point. I think we aspire, like in SAT, EBRW, to be at the top, but I think right now with further alignment of mathematics instruction across the district and our work at the high school, we'll continue to work toward that goal. All of these ACT scores, what I did was I analyzed this chart that you saw 2 weeks ago and noted that the range of these scores over a 5-year period is very narrow. There's not a lot of volatility in these scores. Our students are performing extremely high. We've had high watermarks virtually across the ACT performance chain over the last 2 years. So the targets that you see there represent the mean of the 5-year set of scores. So that would answer hopefully your question, why are some of those nominally lower than this year? Why are some others a little bit higher? The ACT, as you may know, is a very curriculum-based test. We have a strong, rigorous curriculum at the high school with good teachers. I think we're becoming further aligned as a school and as a district, so I would predict that our performance will remain strong in the coming years. Specifically, the composite, which is always the first thing I look to, was 26.9. The high water mark for that score over the last 5 years was 27. So the range again is 0.10 of percentage points. So not a lot of range there. Next slide.
May I just, how many Wilton High School students take the ACT?
It was a lot higher recently. I want to say, I'll get the data, but I want to say it was like 277. It really jumped over the last couple of years as there was some indecision, as you know, around the Connecticut SAT. I probably have it in the packet here, but I looked at it much higher this year. So a good, strong representative group of students who did not sacrifice performance, which is what we hope. Increased participation, increased performance. Thank you. So moving on to, and you can see so that 26.7 on the composite is a mean, but you know what, we were 26.9 this year. Hopefully it'll be a little higher, it could be a little lower, but they're not ranging that far from each other. We want to at least maintain the 67 target on the percentage who met and exceeded all 4 benchmark scores, and the focus areas there that were slightly lower were math and science. So those are a couple of focus areas as we move forward. In AP, you are going to notice some very, very similar data there, and that is because I crunched the numbers on the number of students who are currently enrolled in AP courses and the current number of AP students. You can see that they're remarkably similar. It's actually a little bit higher right now, but I would predict that we'll still experience a little bit of attrition where students might max out in some AP courses and say, I'm taking 4 already, maybe I need to take 3. So again, you recognize from the meeting 2 weeks ago that the AP performance was very, very strong. Those targets, again, are not the focus areas. We're moving some of those benchmarks forward. I would hope to see a slight increase in the number who score 3 or higher, and that percentage of AP students who score 3 or higher that has gravitated as high as 90% historically. I would like to see that really in the 90 range. I think it's important to note that some of these data points represent a very strong cohort that's coming through in the senior class. So, you know, we'll see where we are, but, you know, strong performance in AP and in ACT. School climate? CAPT, as we talked about last time, is a legacy test. We're no longer offering that test. So in the school climate work, and I think the important conversation to have here is really around our action plan and what we're doing new, which is what I want to share with the board. But what we did was we set all of those scores up 2 points. It's been remarkably static, the performance on these school climate scores, on the Safe School Climate Measure, just to be very honest and transparent with you. But I think part of that is, I think we need to glean some more information from our families, from our students beyond this particular metric, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that in the action plan. But we have ticked those all up a little bit, similar to what you saw with the work with Miller Driscoll. And I think the body of work we're doing in school climate is wonderful, and I would invite anybody to come in and spend a little bit of time in our school, because when you walk around, you don't see a school climate with students where you say 57%. I don't see it. So I'm eager to talk about some of our strategies to get us there. Okay. So what we did with here was we have our essential questions. There are 3 of them. The first 2, again, speak to the Connecticut SAT. So how do we support our teachers in preparing our very important students and achieving well on this test? And then the goal, of course, always, I think Lauren stated this so well during the last meeting, is to create a positive school climate where our students reach their social, emotional, and I emphasize those 2, and academic potential. We know that when the social and emotional pieces are in place, our students can achieve very high. And as we can see, our students are, short of the math work. The goals were already there. So in the area of mathematics, and again, my colleagues have talked about the alignment, we've really been doing some concerted work to build the capacity of our instructional leaders to run what I have described as purposeful and effective IET meetings. And specifically, some of the work that we did over the summer to build their capacity, we did a reflective self-assessment exercise with the ILs of their ability to do so. We had them reflect on 7 standards of leading purposeful IETs, which we think was an important way to say, you know, here are the standards that we're trying to adhere to. And then we began already to drill down into the data, which they're already doing in IETs, but that work was important. And then just recently in our first IL meeting, we were actually sharing protocols with our teachers about how to analyze student work and how to analyze student data. And I think somebody alluded to Dr. Charles Smith being the protocol king, so we thank him for his efforts there. So what do these teachers do in these IETs? You know, they'll be analyzing the 2017 data, and also I think the board has noted that we administered the PSAT to a huge cohort of students on Tuesday. So we'll have that data available to analyze in a formative nature to inform how do we help prepare our students further for the SAT. Part of the outcomes to that could be identifying curriculum gaps, content area weakness, and then other skill deficits that we can teach to. And the term we've used in the district is let's accelerate these students, not remediate, but accelerate them. So the work in the math department is going to be less discrete and more incorporated and integrated this year, and that's important. So the work around analyzing these SAT-like and release questions and integrating them into anchor tasks, formative assessments, and indeed summative assessments throughout the school year. So doing really what we're doing in the humanities, where this is just embedded, focused preparation and part of a rigorous program, that's where we need to go with mathematics, and that's where we're going to go. As I said, they'll be analyzing the results of the October PSAT, and they'll be looking at how do we work with the powerful Khan Academy website to prepare students. I was actually going around on Tuesday to our different PD sessions, and that's what the math teachers were doing. They had Brewster Clancy up there walking the teachers through the website, identifying strategies, going to the links where you can actually see the standards and how to prepare students. So using the resources available to us in a wise and fluent way, I think is really going to help us. And then in math, one of the documents that we created, I think is actually quite powerful. Cindy Cherico deserves some credit for this. To get at analyzing student work, mainly multi-step complex problem solving, which is where we believe we need to, lead our students. So what we've done is we've done a crosswalk between and created a rubric between the CCSS math practices and our own 21st century skills, and all the math teachers are doing these analyses, and I think, again, aligning their work against these mathematical practices, which I think is going to help us over time against the Connecticut SAT, which we know is aligned with the CCSS. So I think some good focus work going on in mathematics that is going to move the needle. We moved it 1 percentage point. Again, the goal is to push that into the 80% range. Similarly, in English and in social studies, and we always emphasize that all of our teachers are teachers of literacy. So the work going on in the IETs, again, I have to credit all teachers across the Wilton High School content areas, but in math and social studies, the work that they're doing in the areas of close reading and argumentative writing, which are privileged and tested on the Connecticut SAT, that is already in place. We continue to work on professional learning in that area. We continue to consult with Heather Rocco, and there's some pretty powerful work going on, including lab sites with students, with teachers going around and reviewing best practices of their colleagues, watching their colleagues teach, and then debriefing around instructional strategies and how that can improve student learning. So that's something that has been very powerful in our school and is going to continue to go on in our very important instructional coaching program, if you will. So the English and social studies teachers, I already alluded to this a little bit, but that work is already very much integrated into instructional practices and instructional tasks, so that's going to be important for us. For example, they have SAT-style closed reading multiple choice questions that they have developed that are already multiple choice questions around current curriculum and current content. So it's not discrete work, it's integrated into the work that we do. And that will ensure that our students have the opportunity over the sequence and over the course of a year to practice these skills. It's just good quality teaching about what our students need. And I think, again, that's why we're at 95% right now. Transitioning here into the area of school climate, you've already seen the metrics. So, what are we doing that's new and different, and also following up on some of the important work that we were doing? You can see up there that there is almost an exhaustive list of steps that we're taking to work on school climate. And I think that Lauren so poignantly said last year, we as principals, we live school climate. We live it every day in our actions, in our decisions, in the kind of professional learning we bring in our support of students. So, that's just a holistic approach to say our kids need to be comfortable in school to flourish. So I talked a little bit about this with the board already, but we did last year our connectedness activity, and where students identify teachers whom they could trust and vice versa. I shared with the board that was a very small number of students, in fact in the teens of students who didn't identify a teacher. So we are working already with our instructional leaders for civic and social learning to make sure we're circling around with those students this year and making sure that they're either aligned with their advisors, that they're aligned with their teachers, because that's the important, the connections they have with the students. So that work, of course, is ongoing and is going to be important. And just know that we are pursuing that this school year. That's not an initiative or an activity that has been really neglected at all. We'll continue to work on that. One of the things that I want to see us happen, I think this is an important follow-up to our school climate survey, the pledge that I am making to this board, this school community, and our students, we're going to establish focus groups. We're going to establish focus groups with students and with parents to really ask thoughtful questions and glean information and feedback about school climate at the high school. I've already been in a discussion of this with the administrative team, with Kim Zemo, who's our civic and social instructor, who's our safe school climate coordinator. She's still with us at the high school. She has dual roles. And I've discussed that with our chairman of the PTSA. So I think the thoughtful approach right now is to follow up with focus groups. We'll consult with Bill Preble so that there's a connection between the work we've done in the survey and how do we glean some thoughtful information about how we move forward, and ultimately a cost to ensure that all students are connected, that we're really reaching 100% of the kids, because while most of our students are so connected and doing so many things and so many activities, as evidenced by data around participation in athletics and co-curricular activities, we want to make sure that all of our kids are connected, and that's something we're going to continue to do. The link right now between the new Link Crew program and already the flight program, so we have the flight instructors aligned with the Link Crew leaders. That work is in place, and I think is a thoughtful collection. And we also have our Link Crew members aligned with the advisories. So that is good work. And I want to let you know that part of our work in monitoring school climate, we regretfully somewhat gave up our advisories this year, and talking to Kim and Jim, we said, you know, we need to be out progress monitoring articulation and alignment of the curriculum. And despite what some might hear from their children, because they might not be very effusive about their advisory experiences, although some are, we're seeing some really good quality work in the advisories around building school climate, building connections with students, one teacher to 12 advisors. So some very good work going on there. We already did this actually. We just recently held a student resource panel with members of the school community. So I'll just tell you who's on it, and the freshmen. So beyond the work in Link Crew, beyond the work in advisory, beyond the work in the flight program, we had a panel that consisted of 2 student leaders, a school counselor, one of our social workers. I served on the panel, Officer Ross, to work with our 9th graders in a nice little community in the Clune Auditorium, moderated by the flight instructors, Debbie and Pam. And so a powerful opportunity to share resources and answer student questions about how we're going to make them comfortable as they gravitate through the 4 years of their Wilton High School experience. So that's been, actually we already accomplished that. So the work is ongoing in school climate. Again, I think there are so many positive indicators of school climates with our students, and they're being so successful. And you know, I'm very proud, very, very proud of the work that's going on with the teachers and with the students and with our parent community.
Other questions?
Oh, why do you refer to it as the Connecticut SAT? Is there a New York SAT that's different from Connecticut?
The Connecticut SAT has been in place for a couple of years now, and that's what it's called in Connecticut. When the state made a decision to go away from the SBA 9 through 12, you might recall Governor Malloy worked out an arrangement where they said, you know, this will be our accountability measure in the state of Connecticut. So we call it the Connecticut SAT. It's the test that we administer, it's the snapshot that we administer on that day in March when all the students take it.
But is it different from the SAT given in New York or New Mexico or Arizona?
It's the same test.
It is the same?
It is the same test.
But-
Okay.
So calling it the Connecticut SAT is clear that you're placing capped, right? Which is what your kids took.
Well, no,
It's replacing the other Connecticut.
It's replacing, but it is the SAT. It's not a separate.
The
It's
SAT.
the SAT, not.
It's the SAT,
Okay,
it's
that's
the
what-
specific test that's administered on that day in the spring.
Right.
And it actually, one thing that's interesting, it doesn't include the essay. So it's,
Okay, but it is, okay.
yes.
And Connecticut's not the only state that uses it now for its.
Well, no, I mean, every state has, you take the SAT in every state.
No, I meant.
It was just confusing that it was referred to.
Right, but
Right.
remember now, every student is supposed to take it, and the state is collecting the information, which
Right,
they didn't
right.
do before.
Right. Okay, all right, but it is a regular, it's just the SAT that's given.
Yep.
Private schools, public schools, whatever, it's the SAT. Right?
Yes. Now, students also have the option of opting out their
Right.
scores.
Right.
So they can take the test and then not report those scores.
Exactly, okay, yeah. Okay. Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
Oh, are we,
Thank you.
okay. I was waiting, because,
Mike.
Solder Mill, okay? What would it take to have both a math interventionist and a reading interventionist at each grade level? We have one math interventionist for 900 kids.
Yes.
I mean, we're just not even scratching the surface, I don't think. And I guess the question becomes, all right, it's going to cost money, et cetera, but if we capture and begin to deal with issues and improve development early on, it means we don't have to spend the money at Middlebrook or the high school to deal with those issues. So would it not be wise of us to make the investment, both at Miller Driscoll and at Cider Mill early on, particularly from a reading? I don't think we can ever invest too much money in teaching children how to read, because the benefits become long-lasting, and it would prevent issues, my way of thinking, at the middle school and in the high school later on that we're dealing with, if we caught them early and dealt with them early and fixed them early.
That's the theory of early intervention, absolutely.
Well, then it boggles my mind that we have only chosen to invest in one math interventionist and one reading interventionist at Cider Mill. I mean,
Well, there are multiple reading interventionists at each school. There's actually 4 at Cider Mill and 3 at Miller Driscoll.
Oh, okay, because the impression I got when I asked the question before, there was 1 and 1, one math and
No.
one.
No, just one math.
One per house.
One math per house?
No. One math interventionist for the school.
For this whole school?
One reading interventionist per house.
Per house, oh, okay, I misunderstood. So then, math then, okay, I just, yeah.
They come up short, yeah.
Well, we never had math interventionists before. We decided we would implement that and see how it goes.
Well, no, and we did, we saw the positive results when we
Yes,
did
they
it
are
at
there.
Middlebrook. So it would make sense to me as we put our budgets together, as our planning for next year, that we make that investment, let's move it down a notch, okay, as necessary, and maybe at some point even move it down a notch further to improve that performance and catch it early on. I mean, this is pure common sense investment in kids learning to deal with problems that we can hopefully prevent by catching them early enough that we don't have to deal with them in the middle school or in the high school later on. I mean, it's just my perspective on how we should approach this. And I would think if we have a reading interventionist at each house in Cider Mill, we should have a math interventionist at each house, because we obviously see we continue to lag at our math scores as they go through the system. My 2 cents, for what it's worth. Okay?
Thank you. I have a message from someone watching at home that the audio on the YouTube Live isn't working, and I think we're just, if you are trying to watch at home, please know that we're aware of it and we're trying to fix it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Not that they can hear us.
Yes.
Can you do that? Hold up a sign. Add to that.
Okay.
Thank you, principal.
I'm trying to think of something good to come back with, but since nobody else can hear anyway.
Okay, so when our curriculum coordinators come up, I just wanted to mention a couple of things that were mentioned by our principals. Number one, we did have a woman come from Teachers College this past Tuesday. Her name is Mary Aaronworth. She's the assistant director of the Reading and Writing Project at Teachers College. And she did an all-day workshop with all the classroom teachers from Cider Mill and all of the reading, writing, and social studies teachers at Middlebrook. And the purpose of that workshop was to take what we do in a meaningful way in terms of teaching, reading, writing, and social studies, and embed some things that would ensure success on the SBAC. So we're not doing test prep. What we're trying to do is to infuse good teaching that will result, am I saying this correctly, Gina?
Yes, I mean, part of the title was, keeping reading meaningful.
Right.
So,
Preparing for the SBAC while keeping reading meaningful. So teachers responded very positively to it. So I'm very hopeful that that's going to improve our performance. The second thing was that they mentioned something about the teacher evaluation. So we are still doing the required teacher evaluation. What we have offered teachers is the option to do some extra things around some of the priorities that we're articulating through our process. And number one, they are going to write plans for how they're going to collaborate with their peers, and that will be part of their teacher evaluation. They will also, in prior years, the teacher evaluation had a stakeholder feedback piece to it that was usually around parent feedback. In order to participate in this voluntary pilot, they have to obtain feedback from students and use that feedback from students to change their instruction. I think that's very positive. A third of our teachers have signed up for this, and actually at Cider Mill, it was 50% of the teachers have signed up for it. And the other thing I wanted to say is, in your packet, you have a list and abstracts of all of the summer curriculum projects, I believe. Should be in your packet. We did a lot of projects over the summer in almost every single subject area. I'm not going to go through all of them with you. There were several big projects. 2 in the area of science, and the other was in social emotional learning. Science, because there are new science, and there will be new assessments coming. Social emotional learning is an area that we have been looking at and studying and doing a lot of work around. So over the summer, Kim Zemo worked with one group of teachers to research programs at the elementary and secondary level that we can implement to support our students in their social emotional growth. And then Jen Ringelheim led another group of teachers from every grade level to look at what should the outcomes be and the benchmarks be for social emotional performance for our students at each grade level. The work we're going to do this year is to now engage all of the teachers in a discussion about those goals and objectives and benchmarks, and we're going to be visiting some schools and trying to select a particular program. I'm mentioning this because some of the programs do have an expense associated with them, and so we are going to be proposing some dollars be set aside at both the elementary and secondary level for those programs. Okay? And I'm going to turn it over to our curriculum coordinator.
Okay.
I think this is probably a familiar chart to everyone, but just to remind you, this is the curriculum review cycle. And we're starting with this because although this looks like a simple document, it's actually the catalyst for much of our work. And when it says like write and pilot, implement, monitor and adjust, there's so many layers to that work that we're involved with every day. And so I just wanted to bring this up because we're going to update you on humanities, which is ELA, and social studies, digital learning, and math and science. And we're at various stages in the curriculum review cycle with these subjects. Does anyone have any questions about the review cycle? Okay. So before we started this summer, we kind of reviewed what the upcoming projects were going to be, and we saw that they were numerous. So we decided to enlist teacher help and give them some leadership opportunity and ask teachers to come forward to be facilitators to help us in our work, and also for them to help facilitate the curriculum writing process. So Chuck and all of us helped put together a boot camp training session around understanding by design the curriculum framework, so that the facilitators came and got this sort of, it was like 2.5 day training, but it was more than they've had in the past. And through this training, we were able to come up with a common streamlined template that we're now using in all curricular areas across the district. So that is exciting for us. It might not be as exciting for you guys, but it's exciting for us to have a template, and it also is, teachers will be looking at a similar template when they're looking at different units, especially at the elementary level. They look at a lot of curriculum.
Gina, can I just add that I review all of the curriculum units that are written, and I have to say the quality of the written curriculum this year was far surpassed what had happened in prior years.
So your boot camp worked.
I guess.
Yeah. So we also have done some organizational work around where we house the curriculum, both in anticipation of the new website and also to have a place where sort of the official templates live, but also to balance the collaborative environment that teachers need in order to be responsive to their students. So I think we've done a good job of preserving the collaborative Google environments and also having sort of the standards listed. And I just want to say that part of this process was reviewing what we had listed as standards and actually asking, are we actually assessing all of those standards that we have listed? And so in the process of revising and creating the streamlined template, we also revised the assessments. And that's really important work. And there were lots of teachers that worked over the summer, and a big push was to prepare for ready access, and that was mostly Fran. So I'm going to hand this off to Trudy.
Sorry. Okay, so this is a little summary of what we did over the summer. I just want to take a minute to give you some background on what the next generation science standards are in GSS. It's the long-awaited release of the science content standards, K-12. What makes them similar is that they have content standards by grade and course. There's science and engineering practices, like there are math practices, but what's different is a third dimension called cross-cutting concepts. So not only is it a complex development of curriculum, it's also doing so with attention being paid to the way in which the instruction has to take place. In other words, three-dimensional instruction.
And that's state, right? This next generation, the
No,
science standards
it's
are
actually national.
It is
Next generation
national?
science standards are across, different states have different implementation timelines,
Right.
but it is a national,
So
it's a
these are national
national set of
standards.
The work that the science teachers undertook was actually fairly complex. It involved unpacking the standards to understand what the learning outcomes were for each group. It also involved shifting content. Some things that we were teaching at certain grade levels were no longer expected to be taught at those grade levels, and likewise at the different courses. So there was unpacking the standards, shifting content that took place in all of this. We took the decision, particularly at the elementary schools, not to put too much of a burden on all the teachers. We decided to implement one new unit at kindergarten and third grade because the rest of the grade levels were engaging in social studies work, and one new unit at 6th grade, 7th grade, and in high school biology for implementation in this current year. The further agreement was made to look at the science and engineering practices and look at ways that they could be incorporated immediately into all the other science that's taught in the district. Moving to math, it really was a year in which to prepare for the math curriculum review. There was one new course at the high school for which a curriculum had to be written. That was the Calculus A course. In middle school, the teachers spent time further developing anchor tasks and performance tasks throughout the 6th, 7th, and 8th grades. And at Cider Mill, teachers spent time to create common unit assessments. That's a really huge step because those common unit assessments give teachers something to collaborate about. It provides student work for teachers to review, calibrate, and inform their instruction and identify what student needs were. So that was a really huge step.
This is just a summary of all the work that went on. There were 25 projects in humanities that took place over the summer. So the big work over the summer was that grade 8 is involved in year 1 in their development of units of study in both reading and writing, and they're implementing this year. So several teachers attended some professional learning. We had several days of writing units, and that will continue throughout the year this year. One other project that I just wanted to point out is last year we got some feedback from teachers and we looked at our math data around the vocabulary and language standards, and so K-5 we developed a tool that teachers can use to address the language standards in fun ways with their students. And then with social studies, like Trudy said, we're trying to balance the new things, the new units that teachers at the elementary grades are implementing this year. So in grades 1, 2, 3, and 4, we're rolling out 3 units of study in social studies that are new this year, and one of those units, so 1 unit per grade level, is an interdisciplinary unit. Where the LLC teacher is going to be collaborating with the classroom teachers, and Fran will talk a little more about that as well. Does anyone have any questions around the projects?
Okay, a couple of weeks ago, I presented with Eric on the digital learning initiative, and it was really the rollout. And tonight we're really going to talk a little bit about the learning. I went through a lot of this because the actual rollout had a lot to do with the digital citizenship boot camp that we rolled out just this past month, essentially, which was part of that whole Ready Access, getting students to know how to, be responsible and ethical and be able to use the devices in a way that really keeps with the idea of digital citizenship. We had actual units for K-12, and we had lessons that were aligned not only to the EC standards, but to Common Sense Media, and there's actually a link to the whole thing that is right there. One of the things that we were really excited about doing over the summer, in addition to that, was that we took a look at the keyboarding curriculum. And although we did have keyboarding that was being taught, it wasn't actually in a consistent scaffolded way. So we took a look at basically what we were doing, aligned it, we had the whole group in. We looked at a new tool, we're now using something called Typing Club. We have benchmarks that basically start at 2nd grade and go through all of the grade levels, and actually are tested again, and we'll talk a little bit about this in grade 6 as part of the digital literacy course. So that is really a very important component of this, as the area that I'm in actually affects every area, every subject area, every grade level, and really supports the curriculum. As that indicates, we also talked a lot about professional learning, because the way that we impact learning is by teaching teachers who then teach the students. And so this past Tuesday, as a matter of fact, we had the full PD day, and our topic was assessing the digital tools, which is very appropriate to what we've been talking about today, and the way that tools like Khan Academy and a variety of other tools actually can gauge data and really inform instruction. So that's just one of the things that we've got planned for this year as the professional learning sequence. And we also developed a new course for grade 6. All grade 6 students go through a digital literacy course that provides fundamental skills on a variety of topics that have really a lot to do with digital citizenship, and it really has the students creating an online portfolio as the end product.
Okay, so looking ahead, where are we going with curriculum work? In the science and mathematics areas, science will continue to revise the units that we developed and piloted this year. And we will do the same thing that we did last summer in the other grades. So we'll be unpacking standards to develop additional curriculum units, K through 8, and high school chemistry and high school physical science. We're going to pay particular attention to ensuring continuity across grades, and especially at the transition points. And we will be looking to develop NGSS-aligned assessment resources, which will put us in a position to start preparing for the state's accountability test in science. It's an NGSS-aligned test, which is replacing the CMTs in 5th and 8th grade and the CAT at high school, and that test is switching from a 10th grade CAT test to an 11th grade NGSS test. So just sort of background. Math, we will be launching the curriculum work in full force this year. We will continue to work on our alignment with the Common Core standards and pay a lot of attention to our vertical articulation K-12. And that's important so that we don't miss important content, nor do we risk repeating content that doesn't need to be repeated. We will also be developing instructional resources along the way.
Okay, so what I did is, in terms of the continuing the work, is the revision pieces. We're going to have to look at what we did this year with the Digital Citizenship Boot Camp as year one. Some of the lessons and some of the things that we did will not be repeated next year. However, we will need to continue doing this every single year, so it'll look different. We'll also take a look at what we did with the grade 6 digital literacy course and revise that. In terms of new, one of the things that we've begun talking about in our area is the idea of just doing something that's called micro-credentialing, or providing students with a badge, for example, after they've been able to perform particular skills. This would be next summer. One of the things that we're doing over the course of the year is creating mini lessons that align with the strands in the Library Learning Commons curriculum, and that actually weaves very well into what Gina was talking about, where we're looking at interdisciplinary. This is where the power of digital learning really is when you look at integrated curriculum. And one of the nice things is that as I'm implementing and the other areas are implementing, we're basically doing it together as a collaborative effort, because that's where it works best. We established a digital tool set this year that's consistent. We will continue working with that and refining it. And finally, one of the really very, very important aspects of a Learning Commons is the fact that it's 24/7 and it's accessible anywhere, which means that the presence online, the virtual Learning Commons, is just as important as the physical Learning Commons, and we're going to be continuing to work on that.
So with humanities, we're basically, the way we designed the summer work was sort of to launch the work for the rest of the year. So what we did over the summer is we completed the unit templates for the first trimester or the first quarter, and we're going to continue to work on that and the revision of those unit templates. And the other addition that we're working on is a narrative overview for parents, so that for each unit, there's a little synopsis of what the work is and what the priority standards are and what your child, should be able to do at the end of that unit. And so that will be up on the website as we complete them. And I also think it will help translate a little bit of the K-5 progress report for parents. And we'll be continuing with the grade ELA work, and teacher teams will continue to work on and implement the social studies units in grades 1, 2, 4, and 5. And I just wanted to give an example of one of the interdisciplinary projects. So for first grade, the first unit is basically, how do we study the past, like communities of the past. And so there's an emphasis on oral histories. And so the students, as the performance task, will be able to use EduCreations in conjunction with the LLC teachers to create their own oral histories, and then be able to share those as a class community. So I'm pretty excited about that project, and the fact that it's not just a project, it's actually sort of at the end of the unit showing everything they've learned about how to study history. So that's just one example. And we will continue, this year we will develop 3 units of study with kindergarten and 3rd grade in social studies, but those won't be implemented until next year. So this all involves teacher teams. And then 6th, 7th, and 8th grade social studies are going to continue to revise their unit templates and their assessments and create narrative overviews for parents. So hopefully at the end of the year, we will have all new unit templates and narrative overviews for the humanities curriculum, almost totally for K-8. Just a little bit of work. Any questions?
Gina, are you the one writing the narrative overviews?
It's a combination of the curriculum writing teams, the coaches are helping, I'm reviewing them all.
Okay.
And at the middle school, we, Susanna Prada, the coach, and I just put it out to the department, would you rather us write them and you review them, or vice versa? And we've gotten a mixed response there. So it's just sort of, sharing the work.
Trudy, what sort of bumps or glitches might we expect in rolling out the new science standards?
Good question. I think the expectation, this is very new for the teachers. It is a really new way of teaching. The teachers are supporting each other. We've had support from the Connecticut Science Center as consultants to help us along the way. And most of the science units are not being taught until the end of this year, so I probably have a better sense of how to answer that once we actually see one of the units being implemented. The first one actually will happen in kindergarten weather, which is happening at the end of this month. So that'll be a good sense of how that learning was embraced by the teachers and how difficult or not difficult they find it. And so we will see. I assume there will be bumps, but I think everybody is taking this in a very realistic way. They've done their best to create a unit of study that's true to the intent of the next gen science standards. And we have groups ready to give each other feedback and time for the teachers to talk about how to improve upon this first unit of study.
I had a question perhaps along those same lines, because your comment about the shift of content to
Yes.
align, is it getting more strenuous? In other words, are we taking 10th grade level work down to 9th grade? Or are we taking 8th grade level work down to 7th? I didn't quite understand.
No, not.
Or is it getting easier?
Yeah, there's three
Yeah.
main content areas: life science, physical science,
Right.
and earth science.
Mhm.
And the components of each are shifting. More likely, things are shifting from 2nd to 3rd grade, and some units might be shifting from 3rd to 2nd. There's a forces unit, which we call push and pull, that has been taught at 1st grade, is now moving to kindergarten. So
Okay.
they're not usually big moves, and they're not one directional. The science standards provide performance expectations by grade band, so there is some flexibility in some cases exactly where a particular topic is taught. But most of the shifts are not pushed down to be harder earlier on.
Mhm.
It's just a redeployment of content that provides an adequate representation of each of the 3 core science areas.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I had a question. With Fran, with the digital learning, are you going to be cycling with curriculum review with library learning commons, or are you your own category?
It's a little bit of both. We do have them on the cycle,
Mhm.
but they have to be included in every curriculum
Okay.
review.
Yay.
That's a very good question. It's true, we have our own curriculum that we explicitly teach,
Right.
and that actually came out of that curriculum review that, we presented. But at the same time, the way to best teach it or deliver it is in collaboration or integrated with other curricular areas.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Next up is a review and discuss of budget goals, constraints, and assumptions.
Great, so you have in your packets a discussion document upon which you'll find 6 budget goals laid out, as well as another 15 assumptions. So I thought it would be prudent to begin the discussion around building and planning this year's budget with some clear articulation of what our goals are, as well as what we're considering in terms of assumptions, both in terms of some of the financial and contractual increases, as well as what we're experiencing externally in terms of state funds. So briefly, some of the budget goals are fairly obvious. We're looking to provide adequate funding to maintain the high-quality education here in Wilton, pre-K through 12. As we have done in the past, we're looking to target investments that advance our strategic objectives. I've continued to propose that we adhere to our guidelines for class size. That is an area that's generated some question and conversation. At an earlier business operations meeting, Glenn had asked that we take a look at that. That policy is actually we put on for review as a result of that. And I think it'd be worthwhile to go back and, Chris and I talked a little bit about this yesterday, examine some of the research around class size, but also hear from the teachers. And so I did put some questions out to our staff today, looking to get some feedback about their perceptions about, what do they consider to be ideal, either a number or a range, and then what are the factors that contribute to that, and then whatever else they think you as a board ought to know thinking about class size. And I expect that we'll get some really rich feedback from them. We have are in the process of I'm sorry, number 4. So as you can see and have seen over the last several meetings, we make a significant investment in our professional learning activities, and supporting the development of our teachers, I think, and you heard from Chuck and some of the others, is critical to advancing student achievement. And so one of our budget goals is to continue that investment. I have Chris Burney and Jose Figueroa working with our district administrators and some other staff members to really lay out over 5 years both a bonded capital plan as well as an operating capital plan. And so later in the budget cycle, you'll see formal presentations that reflect our thinking in terms of our prioritized needs. This past year, with lots of conversations and consideration, we made a minimal investment in capital projects, and we have to invest and maintain our buildings. We're sitting in buildings that are maintained. There was deferred maintenance for many years here, and that led to the scope of the project that contributed to this building. So I have things on my list like replacement of floor coverings, carpeting around the district, needs to be removed, and we have lots and lots of other items like that. So it'll be my recommendation that we look at that investment very seriously. And then along the same lines, the board has funded technology for many years. Our total technology spend year over year has come down pretty substantially through working with Ann and reworking some of the lease. What we're trying to do is level funds so we can predict the right amount of technology funding we need in order to maintain our hardware infrastructure as well as maintain our devices that our students are using and keep them current. Beyond that, we have a series of assumptions. Some of them, again, I think are fairly obvious at this point if you've been tracking what's happening up in Hartford. I think it's reasonable to assume that the education cost sharing grant will be zeroed out for Wilton. It has been zeroed out in the governor's proposed budget as well as the executive order under which we're operating currently. I am anticipating that there will be some reduction to this special education reimbursement grant. As you know, Wilton receives annually about $1.1, $1.2 million in reimbursement. We rely on those funds to cover the costs, the unanticipated costs that we have for some of our high-need students. There is quite a bit of chatter, but nothing definite at this point about what's happening, and there are very strong opinions on both sides of that debate. The other, I think, significant concern that has been bandied about and featured heavily in the governor's proposed budget was to reassign a portion of the teacher retirement liability to municipalities. And so that, right now, I think many of us would consider to be the biggest threat to the current operating budget, as well as subsequent budgets if, in fact, Wilton receives a bill for some portion of its teacher pensions. So I think we need to pay very close attention. Some of these other notes, I think they're obvious but are worth saying. It has been our practice to look for efficiencies both within the district and across the district and town. I would again point to Ann's presence tonight as one of those opportunities to try to find a cost-effective way to serve both the town and the district. We're going to comply with mandates. I did want to comment on the teacher evaluation pilot. I think you know, and you've heard Chuck speak about it. Hopefully you've heard me speak about it as well. But we've not ever been fans of the state plan for teacher evaluation. It is not a high leverage approach to improving teacher practice or improving student achievement. It's onerous, and very few people that I know of actually find meaning in the process. It was created through a political process, not a process that really kept what was best for kids and teachers in mind. And so Chuck, working with a team, put together a pilot that we think, and I would say that number of teachers who've subscribed reinforce that belief in a program that's actually meaningful for them, because they can focus on the things that they think are most important in their classroom, that are actually going to move the needle for student achievement, and yield some actionable data. So the requirement that they get student feedback, this was something that has been talked about forever, but because of the politicization of teacher evaluation was not in the state plan, it's in our local pilot. And I think that's a really good thing. It's good for kids, it's good for parents, it's good for teachers, it's good for us. And so our hope is that this will be a raging success, and we'll be able to point our pilot correlated to student achievement, and then we can turn around to the folks at State Ed and say, this is far superior to what you're doing, and this is how we're going to proceed for everybody. So sorry for the dissertation on that. So moving down the list of assumptions, we're also just trying to nail down exactly what are the cost increases that we know we're going to face. And this, none of this is new. I think what's different here is putting in a document around the assumptions and putting it up front in the process. So we know that our contracted projected teacher salaries are going to go up by just over 3%. We know our administrator salaries are going to go up by just a tick over 2%. Similarly to the custodial salaries, our secretaries and paras, we're currently negotiating that contract, so we'll see how that pans out. Marianne is still working on forecasting what our utilities will look like. We're anticipating at this point that our insurance costs will increase by somewhere in the neighborhood of 6%. Transportation was about 1 to 2%, we're imagining. We'll have clearer expectations around the change in student enrollment once we get information back from Milo and McBroom. And then we're also anticipating that we may be able to contribute less to pension and OPEB. So I kind of stop there in terms of the assumptions, and just invite some conversation and other, really other things that you're thinking about that we ought to have front and center as we're beginning this budget process.
Glenn and Chris, you guys discussed this in business ops. Do you want to share?
Yeah, we did in the last meeting, and I think this is, a good starting point for discussion of these issues. We haven't given a lot of thought to it beyond what is here at this point.
Is there any sense from your Board of Finance colleagues on
None.
your committee where they're heading?
No. We have no idea where, if they are in fact going to give guidance, or where it might be. They're just beginning the process.
Okay. Anyone else thoughts?
Well, I'd just like to take some, not tonight, but in the future, time to articulate, the investment in our students and our schools. I mean, we kind of, talk about it, but not like specifics, but there's a lot of ambitious planning going on.
Yeah.
We heard from all the principals as well as from Trudy and Fran and Gina. I mean, that's a lot of work and it's going forward, but that is investment. Glenn brought up a lot of things. So I think if we took time to, again, remind people what we're investing in. Does that make sense? And prioritize that.
Right.
Yeah, the only comment I would make here, and I think with Ann, there perhaps it isn't particularly articulated here, but there's an ongoing process of looking at ways that we can economize with joint services with the town, okay? And there are additional opportunities. I think, clearly, Chris in his role has meant that we have some economies here in our system, and in her dual role now means that we are in fact saving some and having some economies in our system. And we will continue to look at in business ops other opportunities that we can in fact share services with the town where we can get some benefit from it, and perhaps the town benefits by combining services because we're the biggest portion of whatever it is perhaps. But always keeping sacrosanct the wall between the town and our responsibility to educate our kids and the state mandates and where that dividing line is and what can and cannot be done. That's sacrosanct. But we are working on it. We had a good discussion today about that. Recognizing the need to, we've got to find some way to economize. If we want to invest in math interventionists, we've got to find some way to get that money or where it's going to come from.
Excuse me.
The concern has been expressed by the Board of Finance for another mill rate increase, and they're just, or what do we do? How do we stop it? How do we control it? So, I mean, it's a work in progress.
So the assumptions are on for, we didn't discuss tonight, so we'll revisit
going.
them again.
Yeah, we'll just keep working on it. We'll keep you updated at each meeting where we are and what's changing, and what's happening, yes.
Continue the conversation at the next meeting.
The only,
Bruce?
the only piece that I'm not seeing here, maybe I'm missing, is each year we have some level of turnover in our staff, and we need to list that as an assumption.
Oh, good, thank you.
You know, I will tell you, it'd be interesting to see where we are now, because we've had that, and I think, my sense is it's going to be less.
Right.
I think we're going to be less turnover than I think, going forward, because we have a fairly good cadre of relatively new teachers in the system that are hopefully going to be with us. We always have those that retire, but I think that number is I think the turnover rate is going to slow, which is to our benefit in some ways. It isn't to our benefit because more turnover means we do save more money.
Right.
But I look at it the other way. I think stabilizing and having a growing, stable teacher base is really better for us. And I'd rather see that than high turnover of experienced teachers and bringing in, whatever. But it could happen. It's not here. It's hard to predict.
Okay, moving on to our action items. First item up for discuss and approve is the district's strategic goals.
And so we presented a revised goal, a revised strategic instructional objective at our last meeting. We reviewed the vision that was collaboratively crafted as well as the district's theory of action. You heard very clear echoes of that theory of action tonight in the action plans. So I'm asking the board for a motion to approve these strategic instructional objectives.
I move.
I'll second. Absolutely.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries.
Thank you.
Next up is policy, student responsible use policy, which we saw last time around. Is there a motion to approve?
I move.
Second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Future business, next time around, we'll have summary of the summer curriculum work, which is in our packet tonight.
No, that's
Just
the informational
Okay.
items.
It's
not the feature.
So we'll delve into that next time, and our next meeting will be on Thursday, October 26th, back at the professional library, much as we've enjoyed our little field trip tonight. Are there any comments from the public?
I need to clarify.
We need your name.
Oh, beg
Yeah,
your
you know the
pardon.
rules.
Excuse me.
Okay.
All right, shall I use the microphone here?
Okay.
My name is Susan Graybill. I'm a citizen of Wilton. I live at 357 New Canyon Road. Is that all you need? Okay.
Please go ahead.
This is the first meeting I've come to this fall. I came to the one when we had high school open house, and of course that had to be postponed. And then I just forgot last time, so here I am. And this is a question I wanted to ask as a follow-up to last spring, when I had a chance to meet with Kevin and meet with Chuck, and then also to speak at town meeting about the need to investigate the way we use our coaches at Middlebrook, and the incredibly important task of including our teachers in the planning for curriculum and then implementing that curriculum. And my concern last spring was that the teachers at Middlebrook anyway, those were the ones I had had the most conversations with, had felt that they did not have much to say about what they were supposed to, how they were supposed to teach more than what they were supposed to teach, though in fact, as we proceeded through from 6th grade to 7th grade to 8th grade, the curriculum has changed. The kinds of literature that's taught, I mean, that's what I'm more familiar with, because we didn't do as much with social studies last year, and math curriculum is not my I don't know much about that. I just know there've been problems with it. And so my question is, am I allowed to put questions to superintendents at this point of the meeting, or am I never allowed? I mean, I know last spring I tried to ask a question, and Bruce told me that I wasn't able to do that because I was asking questions earlier in the meeting.
Are you asking, are you allowed to engage in dialogue?
Yeah, that's what I'm asking.
No, I'm sorry.
And so at no point in our Board of Ed meetings are we allowed to engage in dialogue then?
Correct, that's correct.
Okay. Some people on the Board of Selectmen told me I could, so that's why I asked. So am I allowed to put my questions out and then not expect an answer? Is that what I do?
We will certainly follow up.
Oh, okay, but just not tonight, just not tonight.
Please pose your question.
Okay, well, first, how many coaches are at Middlebrook? And coaches in what discipline? And, you know, last year we had one in English and one in social studies. No, one in English social studies and one in math science. And it was difficult for one person to travel around the different classrooms that they needed to travel around to in order to coach the teachers in 6th grade and 7th grade into doing these new ways of implementation. And the second thing was, that was most important to me, was that I had understood from nodding heads at the town meeting that we would slow down the process of changing curriculum as we move forward into the 8th grade and give 6th and 7th grade teachers a chance to have some feedback provided to superintendents about, well, how's it working and what don't you like? Because there's an awful lot of gnashing and moaning of teeth, not just because it was a change, but after 4 years, there was still gnashing and moaning of teeth. Gnashing teeth and moaning and groaning. And so I wanted to follow up and just ask for the public record, what have we done? Have we slowed stuff down? Are we going back and deliberately talking to the teachers? And I know the teachers didn't come forward last spring. I went back and said, okay, here's your time, here's your chance, and they did not. And so we have to find other ways to welcome their feedback so that they don't fear some sort of retribution. I know that's not what you want to communicate to them, but that's what they're feeling. And so that's my concern.
Okay, thank you.
I don't know how to do that.
Yeah, thank you, Mrs. Griswold. Would anyone else from the public like to come forward? Seeing that, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Second.
Second.
Thank you very much.